I'm really able to sort of maintain that 5 mile an hour window, and it's a great way to calibrate your distances. It's remarkable. We're kind of looking at all the progressions in the table, and we can see that the 5 miles an hour is leading to about an 11-yard gap per club. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to take you through a gapping session and help you understand how you can make sure the clubs that you've got in your bag are gapped appropriately for yourself. Everyone who plays the game has their own unique delivery, their own unique swing speed, and everyone sort of gets to their yardages in a different way. And I don't really think it's very well explained in really common knowledge how you can sort of gap the clubs. I mean, obviously you can go and pay for the service, you can go and see, a pro and they'll gap your clubs for you, but what is it that you need to look for and how do you go about that? We're going to run through that today. All right, guys, as we mentioned, lots of different sort of maybe change of thought or different concepts that people might think about as the best way to gap your set. But I want to introduce you to something that really, really works for me in one way that I feel really simplifies the process of getting your yardages dialed in. Obviously, different clubs in the bag, we know how prevalent combo sets are now. So really a standard progression throughout the bag of launch angle, spin rate, and ball speed is not really likely to happen anymore. As you see the set progress and change and evolve as you go from the lower clubs in the bag, the shorter ones like your sand wedge and gap wedge, into the irons and up into the hybrids and woods, you're going to see such a difference in design that really this idea that every club has to be 4 iron at 4,000 RPMs, 5 iron at 5,000 RPMs, I want people to sort of think beyond that, because that might not be the case. If you take a 4 iron that has a really, really deep CG and then a pitch and wedge with a really high CG, you're going to see such different launch properties from those golf clubs, and that's actually going to not make it possible for us to keep and retain that exact progression and spin rate. So one concept I'm going to introduce you guys today is focusing more on the ball speed that you generate throughout the bag. I look at my clubs that are going 5 mile per hour progressions from club to club. It might be slightly wider from the sand wedge to the gap wedge, and we're going to run through it today, but I know that once I get into pitch and wedge, 9 iron, 8 iron, 7, all the way up, I'm really able to sort of maintain that 5 mile an hour window, and it's a great way to calibrate your distances. So we're going to run through that today, starting with the 54-degree wedge. All right, target yardage 105. We've kind of set up. We're not really looking at how I deliver it or the specifics of how I deliver it. We're very focused on the ball speed, and obviously subsequently the launch and spin. Peak height's always just a good one to keep an eye on. Nice when you're gapping the bag to see the sort of consistency of the apex of your ball flight. You want to be mindful that your ball flight should start quite low in the wedges. It's shocking to hear probably that your wedges actually do fly the lowest of any club in your bag, with them being the shortest in terms of how far we carry them. The apex closer to us, that's why we feel like they fly high, and obviously they have the most loft, so logical thinking would tell you they fly high. They actually don't. We're going to see that in terms of the peak height here. They probably will fly 25 feet lower than the highest apex I have in the bag. So start with 54, and then we'll work our way through the set. So warm into a couple here, 101. Pretty decent strike on that one. You can see the peak height at 82, nearly 11,000 RPMs of spin. So actually the spin pulling that ball flight sort of down ever so slightly. And I always remind people that when you watch the best wedge players in the world, they hit those loaded little spinny ones. Is that a high ball flight or is that a low ball flight? Generally it's a lower ball flight, isn't it? You see the friction, so that the ball on the face, so the contact a little bit longer, the friction a little bit higher, and that's actually pulling the ball flight down. So that's one of the reasons we see the ball flight be a little bit lower with those wedges. So let's do a couple more and see where we are at with the sand wedge. Pull. but we're about the target carry number, around the 105 that I'm looking for. Better, little bounce. So we're about our number there. So ball speed is about 86 miles an hour. All right, up to gap wedge. So we're going to see a little bit of a hike in that carry number. Now that's probably a little bit on me from a delivery standpoint. As I get a little bit lower in loft, I find it quite easy to hit the distances. Like I have to work quite hard to hit sand wedge 104 or 103, whatever that average roundabout there. So it does get a little bit easier as I lose loft. So gap wedge about 120 here. Swing 116.6. You can already see going from sand wedge to gap wedge, my ball flight has lifted 10 feet. Just interesting little observations to make about your ball flight and knowing that how we're going to sort of flight it if it's a windier day. Things like that are really good little nuggets to know. Okay, so even higher there, 102, carried our number, 120. All right, so 96 miles an hour there. So guys, as I said, with the wedges, you're very likely to see slightly bigger gaps with the ball speed. We're using, a bladed club, but we're also delivering lots of loft. We're not delivering as aggressive of a golf swing. So expecting to see, and we'll show you in the table later on, where those gaps occur. Now this is when I start to see a real amount of predictability throughout the set, throughout the iron set. We're in the stock pitch and wedge. So for me, if I'm calibrating myself prior to going out to play golf, I'm already going, I'm really looking for this to be a 105 miles an hour club for me. And now I'm going in 5 mile an hour increments up to 110 in the 9 iron, 115 in the 8 iron, 120 in the 7 iron. And in certain days I might be faster, in certain days I might be slower, but I'm always looking for that 5 mile an hour relationship. Or around that window we like to be for the pitch and wedge. If I was going to the golf course or playing a tournament today, it'd be really nice for me to know I'm kind of calibrating my speed for the day so that sort of the distance that I would expect to hit it, I'd feel confident and comfortable in those yardages. The carry number was 136 on average. The peak height is at 107. We started off in the mid 80s. Now we're in the mid 100 and 105, 107, something like that. So very different ball flight as you get into the irons, and we're going to see that kind of continue to go up as we move into the mid iron. So we're at 9 iron. Let's see if we're about that 109, 110 ball speed number. A 109.6. I know I keep going on about the peak height, but you have to be aware of these things. Obviously, as you play in different conditions, that's 117 out of that one. So as the velocity increases, again, I still think there's a misconception that spin is what makes the ball go up. It's the lack of spin and the high velocity. So as ball speed increases, obviously you've got the right launch angle, but it's the lack of spin with high velocity that makes the ball hit that highest apex. It's not highest spin. Very close to the number. All right, guys, so trending really quite nicely. We've been 105, we've been 110, we've been 115 with the 8 iron, some really nice progression. So I've not once talked to you guys yet about what lofts my clubs are at. To be honest, I don't care. It actually doesn't matter. I don't care if you need a 29 degrees 6 iron and a 35 degree 7 iron. It doesn't matter, honestly, because as your delivery evolves, and there's probably going to be parts of your swing where you're more comfortable with certain clubs and less comfortable with others, and lofts may have to be adjusted to compensate. That's okay. You don't have to have a standard progression and just suffer the fact that you don't hit an 8 iron as far as you think you should, or as far proportionally as the rest of your set goes. So my irons are basically built and designed from our loft and lie setup so that they go these gaps that we're explaining today. So I should be pretty set up nicely for this next one to fly. It'll be 120 ball speed and fly about 170 to 172. Oh yeah. Probably no surprise, 7 iron's my favourite club in the bag. That's very comfortable for me to be in and around those numbers. If we look at the averages, 119.7 ball speed, really close, tight standard deviation on the spin. The peak height now at 115, so it's coming up and up and up. We're right on 169.4. I was kind of targeting about 170 on that. So, and you can see, guys, like I'm, reasonable club head speed. I'm certainly nowhere near that kind of sort of fantasy spin rate of 7,000. I don't want to be 7,000 with my 7 iron. I would lose too much distance. There's not enough upside in it for me to be at 7,000. Obviously each to their own in terms of what you like and have more spin if you need it. I don't feel like that's necessary for me. I'm really happy that I can, peak the golf ball at 115, spin it at 6,100, and have an apex of about 48 degrees land angle coming into the green. That's all the stopping power I'll ever need. I can certainly spin one on a green, I can back it up, and I can drop it dead if I really, really need to. So don't need to chase these numbers. Okay, let's see, 6 iron here, 125 is the target number. All right, guys, so this is the breaking point in my iron set where I actually change models, and it's actually worth sort of a little pause to talk about that, because obviously, as we would expect, this is a hollow body construction in the Mizuno 245. It's going to get a little bit quicker. The reason I have this, and you'll see that, is I actually have to put less into it to keep my sort of loft progression where it needs to be. So I think that's a really, really good thing, that you can be a little bit less sort of, call it forceful with the swing, a little bit, more controlled with your motion, and you're not trying to kind of really make it go a certain distance. So 130 is the number, but I'm actually going to swing, probably dial back my speed a little bit at this point to get it to go, 190, or yeah, about 195, I think we said we want it to go on this one. So yeah, a good thing to dial that back ever so slightly. All right, guys, last but not least, into the 4-iron. A club that's in my bag some days, out my bag some days. I do like to kind of play around with some different hybrids that I've got in the bag right now that actually I'm really, really enjoying. And we'll do a video on that for those of you who are interested in whether the long part of your bag should evolve out of the irons into hybrids quicker. I'm starting to think that there's courses where that could be beneficial for me, but I really do like my irons. I've always sort of said to you guys in the what's in the bags and these types of things that, you know, iron play is the best part of my game, and you can kind of see that probably especially from like 7 through to 5 iron. That's where I get really comfortable within my swing, and I think the results sort of show that. So 4 iron though is where, you know, if everyone tapers off probably a little bit in performance with a 4 iron, I don't think anyone feels that comfortable. We're looking at right now probably ball speed about 135 with this one, but it's that spin rate starting to come down, and that's maybe where the value of going with something that kind of, you know, keeps the flight and spin up a little bit may have more value. But let's see. You know, we're still talking about the 5 mile an hour increments and the iron gapping. It's remarkable. We're kind of, you know, looking at all the progressions in the table, and we can see that the 5 miles an hour is leading to about an 11-yard gap per club. But what was fascinating there was, and we highlighted it before we even hit it, was the change in head setup, the kind of head, the makeup, going to the hollow body. It did give us a little bit more launch and a little bit less spin, and we ended up picking up a bit more of a gap, which I'm not that unhappy with, to be honest. If I go from 181 to 196 to, you know, call it 208, 209 in the 4 iron, and then we're into the woods, you know, I kind of need those gaps to start stretching out because I don't carry that many clubs at the top end of the bag, so they probably should do that a little bit anyway. All right, let's hit some 4 irons, and then we'll look at the table. We're going to just run you through the report that we generated from our foresight sort of test there. And this is something that we would want all of you, if you're going to go through this test, this is the purpose, is to come out with an outcome, a data set that you can now rely on that has basically created a baseline for you for the performance of your clubs. You're going to see things that maybe you expect, and like we just did there, we're going to see some things that you're not going to expect that are going to be pretty interesting. So sequentially, we're going to start sand wedge, and then we're going to run sort of all the way up. You know, we talked about, I've always struggled a little bit with how far my wedges go. I don't, and it might be an intent thing. I don't really ever try to hit a sand wedge full out by any means, but you know, it is a bit of a challenge when I get that kind of 110 number that I'm stuck between a kind of 103 and a 119 gap wedge. But as we kind of run through this, we'll see it start to make a bit more sense. So we were talking about, for the purpose of this test, that we felt like when we got into the stride with the iron set, call it the 4 to pitch and wedge iron set, our hypothesis was that 5 miles an hour was the right gapping per club. So you can see there, pitch and wedge over here, we were just under 105, 104.6, 9 iron, 110, 8 iron, 115, 120, 125, 130. And interestingly enough, it got a little bit quicker in the 4 iron. On the 4 iron, I actually have the club a ½ inch longer, and I go from a 120 gram shaft to a 100 gram shaft. That's fully expected that I would pick up a little bit extra speed as a consequence of that. Maybe you get tired of me saying it, but I had to emphasize the point as we went through it. Look at the peak height difference. Sand wedge at 83 feet, 98, 107, 111, 111, 114 points, call it 115, 114, 114, and 112.4. You can see the consistency in the apex, guys, that when you get the set dialed in, the consistency of that apex and height window should be really, really consistent. We've talked about in the past, the driver swing speed should be about what your max apex is. I swing driver about, in that 112 to 114 window most of the time. And that is exactly where I'm averaging out throughout my iron set. So it was always a little cheat code in the fitting bay. I would always think to myself, if I had a player like myself come in and I would look at that correlation, one way in which I'd know if they were flighting through the right window. So we can see that the gapping per ball speed was good, but what does that mean for the carry distances? So interestingly enough, as the 5 mile an hour increments continued, we kind of went from 136 with the pitching wedge. We picked up about 11.5 yards. We picked up another 11 yards, 11, 12. This is where we talked about the change in set, the break in technology. So the 6 iron is just a player's cavity, not much tech. 5 iron, we get into hollow body with a bit more tech, and we jump up in carry from 181.5 to 197.7, 16 yards. And then we jump up again another, call it 16.5 yards into the 214. And I need that because the next club in my bag after 4 iron is the little kind of 5 wood I carry that flies 235. So if I didn't start to stretch the iron set here, I'm going to be left with a massive gap. If I went 181, 192, in 203, 204, then into 5 wood at 235, I'm left with a heck of a gap. So that's something where that's why I've put in the 2 hollow bodies in there to give me that benefit of a little bit more ball speed. As you'll see there, it started to jump up a little bit. And it also gave me the chance to sort of retain the velocity that kept the peak height up. Normally in the set, you would see a bit of a sort of curve that the wedges start quite low, short and mid irons go up in terms of peak, and then the long irons, the peak height comes back down. Well, I've kind of, negated that happening within my set by choosing my equipment wisely. And you guys could obviously do the same. So hopefully, guys, a fun little test for you guys to see the way in which I look at gap in my bag and maybe give you an idea that if you can get access to, foresight base somewhere where you can get on there and do some sort of yardage gapping testing, you can walk out with a similar report that can sit in your file and share it with your coach. Maybe there's some things you see are opportunities to improve. I'm looking at that there. I'm probably going to dissect it a little bit more in terms of, okay, what are my spin windows? Are they appropriate, right? So I'm looking at going from 10,600, I've dropped 1,300 there. I've dropped another 1,200 there. I've only dropped 700 there. So I'm going to start to look at that, and sort of make sense of it. But at the end of the day, I want to know how far does each club carry. I'm looking at the wedge, 136, 136, F147, etc., etc. So that's going to give me the vital information that when I'm on the golf course, I know my apex, I know my carry distances, I know my sort of comfort in terms of the flight windows, and that's going to make so much more sort of sense to me when I'm trying to select a club, and it's going to give me that advantage. I would say if you knew this information, you would have a jump on 97, 98% of the field of players you're playing in. They might be great players and they might be technically better than you, they might be more talented than you. But when it comes to building a set of clubs that can perform to an optimal level, this is what you need to have. This will give you that competitive advantage if you feel like you're sort of a little sort of lacking in some other areas. Maybe you're not the fastest, maybe you don't putt the best, maybe your short game's not the best, whatever it may be. But this is one way in which you can use sort of the sort of gapping and the loft and lie adjustments as you go to build a really well matched set of clubs. All right, guys, so hopefully that helps you with a little bit of food for thought in terms of how you can set up your own bag for performance, which is what it's all about. You've got to have the clubs in your bag working for you, making sure they progress really, really nicely. So if you've got any more comments, if you've got anything you'd like us to dive into in further videos regarding things like this, where it comes down to the details of how far your clubs go, how high they fly, all those sort of technicalities, Love to dive into that stuff with you. I think that's a channel where a channel like ours, you know, can really help you guys explain and understand some of the nuance between how to set your bag up, how to choose your clubs wisely, maybe where to break the set and how to transition. I know that's something I'm going to do a little bit more work on over the next few weeks with a new sort of loft progression within my wedges. We'll be sure to share that on the channel very, very soon. So if you would like to see that, let us know in the comments, as always, below. We love hearing from you guys. That's what this channel is all about. So if you enjoyed that, look forward to more videos like this. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you again soon.